9 shocking, recent archaeological discoveries that could rewrite world history. What do you think would happen if a single swing of a pickaxe was enough to overturn everything humanity had believed to be true for hundreds or even thousands of years? What if an unidentified set of human remains suddenly emerged and had the power to rewrite history? What if a tomb buried for centuries turned out to hold a story that had never been recorded in any historical text? Or what if a structure thought to have disappeared forever suddenly resurfaced beneath the ground? Would we really understand humanity's past? Or have we only uncovered the tip of a massive iceberg that's still waiting to be explored? Every year, archaeology brings discoveries that leave the world in awe. Some mysteries have only recently come to light, yet the more scientists investigate them, the more new questions emerge. And perhaps the most fascinating part is that many of these recent discoveries are forcing experts to reconsider conclusions that were once regarded as unquestionable historical facts. Hello, and welcome back to Ancient History. My friends, in today's video, we're going to explore 9 of the most shocking and mysterious archaeological discoveries announced in recent years. From Egypt's extraordinary tombs and a mummy so perfectly preserved that no scientist has dared to remove its wrappings, to a lavish 1,600-year-old mansion, a 3,000-year-old zoo in China, the 29,000-year-old remains of a child discovered in Thailand, and 2 one-of-a-kind ancient boats recently unearthed in Vietnam's ancient citadel of Louis Lao. Each discovery has revealed another missing piece of humanity's past while raising new mysteries that scientists have yet to fully explain. So, which discovery is the most astonishing? Which hidden secret could change the way we understand human history? Join us as we journey back through time, because what you'll see in the final moments of this video may completely transform the way you look at history. Now, without making you wait any longer, let's get started. The City of the Dead, beneath Paris, reveals a chilling truth about 6 million remains. Beneath the crowded and glamorous streets of Paris lies an entirely different world, one few dare to imagine. There are no lights, no music, only endless corridors and walls built from human bones. This place is the Paris Catacombs, a vast underground labyrinth containing more than 6 million sets of human remains, quietly existing for centuries. Just hearing that number is enough to send chills down your spine. But the way this place came to exist is what truly makes people stop and think. The story begins in the mid-18th century. At that time, Paris was not only a cultural center, but also a destination for people from all over, drawn to live and work in the city. As the population grew rapidly, a seemingly small problem became a serious crisis. There was no longer enough space to bury the dead. Cemeteries became overcrowded. Bodies were buried on top of one another, and in some areas, severe pollution began to spread. The air grew suffocating, and living conditions were directly affected. Authorities were forced to act quickly to prevent the city from descending into a full-blown crisis. Fortunately, beneath Paris already existed an extensive network of limestone quarries, carved out over centuries. These tunnels were vast but abandoned, leaving the ground unstable and prone to collapse. That's when a bold idea emerged. Why not use these empty spaces to solve both problems at once? And so, the plan began. Over the course of several years, especially during a peak period lasting about 2 years, millions of remains were transferred underground. Everything was done in silence, under the cover of night. Cart after cart quietly left the cemeteries, carrying bones into the depths below. There were no ceremonies, no public attention, only layers of bones stacked upon one another, forming the haunting walls that still stand today. At first, this was merely a practical solution, cold, functional, and nearly forgotten. But everything changed when Napoleon Bonaparte came to power. More than just a military leader, he recognized the unique potential of this underground system. With careful planning and reorganization, the catacombs were gradually transformed into a site of historical significance, one that could be visited both to preserve history and to spark human curiosity. Yet stepping into a place that holds millions of human remains is not simply a tourist experience. Strange stories have long surrounded the catacombs. Some claim they hear footsteps echoing behind them, even when no one is there. Others say that in the darkness, shadowy figures sometimes pass by too quickly to tell whether they are real or just illusions. And deeper within the maze, rumors persist of hidden chambers, place is said to be used by secret societies. Whispers speak of mysterious rituals, and names like Satan, Valak, and Paimon are occasionally mentioned. While no concrete evidence has ever confirmed these claims, the uncertainty only makes the atmosphere feel even heavier. If there's one piece of advice repeated more than any other, it's this: never attempt spirit summoning or seances here. In a place filled with so much death, you can never be sure what you might be reaching, or whether something might answer back. Above ground, Paris shines, vibrant and alive. Below, a silent world holds the memories of millions. Two contrasting realities existing side by side, reminding us that history is not only found on the surface sometimes, it lies deep beneath our feet, cold, quiet, and full of mystery. The real tomb of the legendary D'Artagnan, discovered after more than 350 years. Have you ever wondered where someone known around the world through novels, movies, and legendary sword fights would be laid to rest after death? Most people would probably assume the answer is simple, that they'd be buried somewhere ordinary, just like everyone else. But when it comes to D'Artagnan, the legendary captain of the Musketeers who served under Kings Louis XIII and Louis XIV of France, and the real-life inspiration behind the famous novel The Three Musketeers, the answer remained a mystery for more than 350 years. What's even more fascinating is that this mystery didn't begin with a grand archaeological expedition. Instead, it all started with a surprisingly ordinary accident. Here's what happened. In February 2026, the floor of an ancient church in the Wolder district of Maastricht, the Netherlands, suddenly began to sink. At first, that might not sound like anything extraordinary. You might be thinking, if the floor sinks, you just repair it. But that seemingly minor incident soon captured the attention of archaeologists across Europe. While reinforcing the area beneath the church altar, construction workers discovered a hidden cavity beneath the floor. As they dug deeper, they uncovered an ancient tomb located directly beneath the church's main altar. Just imagine that for a moment, a grave resting beneath the altar itself, the holiest part of the church, a place that during the Middle Ages was typically reserved for only the most important individuals. That fact alone was enough to convince researchers that they were dealing with something highly unusual. The church's deacon, Jos Valky, immediately contacted archaeologist Wim Dijkman, a researcher who had spent nearly 30 years pursuing one question: where was D'Artagnan really buried? For Dijkman, it was one of those moments that no researcher ever truly expects, a discovery that had the potential to change an entire career. Once the official excavation began, archaeologists carefully removed layer after layer of soil until a human skeleton slowly emerged beneath the altar. What immediately stood out was the burial location itself. This was clearly not an ordinary grave. Its prestigious position strongly suggested that the individual had once held an exceptionally high status in society. But the real turning point came when archaeologists made a discovery that stopped everyone in their tracks. Embedded in the skeleton's chest was an ancient musket ball. The coincidence was almost unbelievable. Historical records describe D'Artagnan's death during the Siege of Maastricht in 1673, where he was fatally struck in the chest by a musket shot while fighting on the battlefield. As if that weren't enough, archaeologists also uncovered a 17th-century French coin inside the tomb. It may have seemed like a small detail, but it added another important piece to the puzzle, supporting the theory that the individual buried there may have been a high-ranking French officer who served under King Louis XIV. The skeleton's burial position also raised new questions. Rather than lying neatly in place, the body was slightly tilted, almost as though it had been placed inside a cramped space in haste. Taken together, these clues led researchers to focus on one remarkable historical figure, Charles de Batz de Castelmore, the real D'Artagnan. Born in the Gascony region of France, he faithfully served both King Louis XIII and King Louis XIV, earning a reputation for his unwavering loyalty and remarkable military achievements. It was this very man who later inspired Alexandre Dumas to create the immortal literary hero known simply as D'Artagnan. Today, the skeleton has been transferred to an archaeological institute in Deventer for further scientific analysis. At the same time, DNA samples have been sent to Munich, Germany, where researchers are comparing them with genetic material provided by descendants of the D'Artagnan family. In other words, the investigation has not yet reached a final conclusion. The 3,500-year-old tomb filled with artifacts from across the ancient world. We often think of an ancient tomb as nothing more than a final resting place for the dead. But sometimes, beneath layers of earth and stone that have lain undisturbed for thousands of years, there are stories waiting to be told. Stories about civilizations that were connected on a scale few people would ever imagine. And that is exactly what happened on the island of Cyprus, where archaeologists unexpectedly discovered a communal burial site filled with treasures originating from many different regions of the ancient world. The story began in 2017, when researchers conducted a large-scale survey east of the ancient city of Hala Sultan Teki. Rather than immediately excavating the area, they first used modern technology, including ground-penetrating radar and magnetometers, to investigate what lay beneath the surface. The results astonished the entire team. Deep underground, they detected large empty spaces displaying unusual characteristics, as though they concealed structures that had been buried for centuries. As researchers analyzed the data more closely, they realized these underground voids were not random at all. They appeared to lead to ancient passageways and burial chambers hidden beneath the earth. At that point, a research team led by Professor Peter Fischer and Dr. Teresa Berge of Sweden's University of Gothenburg began excavations. With each layer of soil removed, another piece of the past emerged. To date, archaeologists have uncovered 52 human skeletons within the tomb complex. Each set of remains represents an unfinished story from more than 3,500 years ago. Among them, researchers were particularly interested in the remains of a woman estimated to have been between 30 and 40 years old. Resting on her chest was an ivory ornamental button, positioned as though the burial ceremony had taken place only yesterday. DNA samples were also collected in hopes of uncovering more information about the origins and lives of the people who once lived there. Yet what truly amazed scientists was not merely the number of skeletons discovered. Surrounding the deceased was an extraordinary collection of valuable artifacts originating from multiple civilizations. Each object was like an ancient passport, telling the story of trade routes that stretched thousands of miles across the Mediterranean. One of the most remarkable finds was an ancient Egyptian scarab amulet. Inscribed on its surface were hieroglyphs carved around 1350 BC. To the ancient Egyptians, scarabs symbolized rebirth and eternal life. The presence of such an object in a tomb on Cyprus demonstrates an astonishing connection between two civilizations separated by hundreds of miles. The discoveries did not stop there. Archaeologists also uncovered an ancient seal originating from Babylon, dating to approximately 1800 to 1600 BC. The seal was intricately carved with images depicting gods, humans, and animals. Not only is this a rare artifact, but it also serves as evidence that cultural influences from Mesopotamia once reached as far as the island of Cyprus. However, the object that attracted the most attention was a vessel standing approximately 16 inches tall, imported from Greece around 1400 BC. The vessel was decorated with extraordinary craftsmanship and intricate designs, the most striking of which was an artistically rendered ram's head. According to researchers, this vessel was likely used in funeral-related religious ceremonies. What makes it truly exceptional is that no similar artifact has ever been discovered anywhere else in the world. In other words, it may be a one-of-a-kind object surviving from the Bronze Age. As more artifacts were recovered, archaeologists became increasingly convinced that this site was far more than an ordinary tomb. The presence of the unique vessel, along with numerous valuable grave goods, suggests that the structure may once have served as a sacred location for the entire community. It may have been a place where religious rituals were performed, where ceremonies honoring the dead took place, or where important spiritual practices of the ancient population were conducted. Perhaps most importantly, the large number of artifacts originating from distant regions has revealed the significant role that Hala Sultan Teki played in history. 3,000-year-old ancient zoo discovered in China. Did you know that 3,000 years ago, people had their own unique way of keeping wild animals? Not in zoos like we have today, but in a remarkably sophisticated system closely tied to royal power, religious rituals, and mysteries that archaeologists are only now beginning to uncover. And the most surprising part? The evidence has just been discovered in China. Specifically, during excavations carried out between 2023 and 2024 at the Yinshu archaeological site in Anyang, Henan province. China, archaeologists uncovered a complex of 19 ancient sacrificial pits spread across an area of approximately 13,350 square feet. At first glance, those numbers may not seem particularly remarkable, but once researchers looked inside the pits, they were completely stunned. Why? Because instead of pottery, weapons, or other ordinary artifacts, they found the carefully buried remains of numerous wild animals arranged in an exceptionally organized manner. The discoveries included deer, wolves, tigers, leopards, foxes, gorals, wild boars, Asian water buffalo, and even birds such as swans, cranes, and geese. But the detail that truly sent chills through the archaeological community came next. Several of the animal skeletons were found wearing bronze bells around their necks, and in total, researchers uncovered 29 bronze bells. Just think about that for a moment. Wild animals wearing bells. Doesn't that suggest they may have been kept under control within an enclosed space? It was precisely this detail that led Niu Shishan, a researcher at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, to propose a fascinating theory. According to him, these animals may not have been captured from the wild immediately before being sacrificed. Instead, they were likely kept and managed in specially designated enclosures under the control of Shang dynasty kings or members of the royal aristocracy. In other words, as far back as 3,000 years ago, there may already have been a highly organized system for managing wild animals rather than simply hunting them for ritual sacrifices. And the discoveries didn't stop there. As archaeologists continued their analysis, they noticed that the different animal species had been arranged inside the pits according to consistent patterns. This strongly suggests that their placement was intentional and may have formed part of elaborate sacrificial ceremonies practiced during the Shang dynasty, which ruled from approximately 1600 to 1046 BC and is widely recognized as one of the earliest civilizations in Chinese history. If you've heard of Yinshu before, you'll know that it is no ordinary archaeological site. It was the final capital of the Shang dynasty, famous for its royal tombs, oracle bones, and ceremonial traditions of enormous cultural and religious significance. That makes the discovery of what appears to be a carefully controlled system for keeping wild animals even more extraordinary. Interestingly, this isn't the first time archaeologists have encountered evidence of what could be described as an ancient zoo. Earlier archaeological sites dating to the Warring States period also revealed sacrificial pits containing rare animals, including extinct ape species, leopards, Asian black bears, and lynxes. What makes Yinshu different, however, is how much clearer and more systematically organized the evidence appears to be. That raises an intriguing question. Just how much control over nature did people possess 3,000 years ago? Were these animals kept solely for sacrificial rituals, or did they also serve as symbols of royal authority and political power in ways we still don't fully understand? And perhaps most importantly, if a royal animal enclosure like this truly existed, how many more secrets of the Shang dynasty are still buried beneath the earth, waiting to be uncovered? Stone Age skeletons in a mass grave reveal horrific human violence 6,000 years ago. 7 human skeletons, including 2 male skeletons, 1 female skeleton, 3 children's skeletons, 1 infant skull, along with fragments of hand bones and several disarticulated arm bones, were recently discovered by archaeologists in Bergheim, France, in an ancient mass grave. This grisly, almost horror movie-like discovery sheds light on the extreme violence that existed 6,000 years ago. The discovery was reported in the December issue of the journal Antiquity, which stated that the individuals in the pit had been killed during an attack or conflict and then placed in the mass grave, where previously some left arms had been buried, severed with axes or sharp weapons. It is still unclear whose arms were cut. All skeletons were found with their arms intact, except for 1 male skeleton whose skull shows signs of a severe blow. This skeleton is missing its left arm, though researchers have not determined whether the missing arm was also placed in the pit. Archaeologist Fanny Chanal from the Antia Archaeological Institute in Habsheim and her research team are unsure whether the perpetrators specifically targeted left arms for any particular reason, but they suggest the left arms may have been taken as trophies of war. The scattered hand bone fragments at the bottom of the pit indicate that the hands of the severed arms were deliberately smashed. Carbon dating of the bones shows that these individuals lived 6,000 years ago during the Neolithic period. At that time, deceased members of farming communities were usually buried in round-mouthed pits. However, the Bergheim discovery provides the first evidence that victims of violent conflicts from this era were also buried in such round-mouthed pits. This is a highly significant finding, but it raises more questions than answers. Prior to this discovery, the nature of Neolithic mass graves was still largely mysterious. Some scientists believe the pits were originally silos, later repurposed for burials. Others suggested the pits were intended for high-status individuals, with servants or family members killed to accompany them. Another hypothesis is that slaves may have been killed and buried as sacrificial offerings to deities, as several artifacts were found alongside the skeletons, including a piece of jewelry made from seashell, a stone spearhead, a pig jaw fragment, and 2 wild rabbit skeletons, all consistent with ritual offerings. It remains difficult to determine which of these hypotheses best explains the Bergheim mass grave.